Every year, millions of users tune into Apple's software events expecting a revelation, only to find themselves watching the same presentation they saw 5 years ago. Looking at the early rumors for iOS 27, that sense of update fatigue is only set to deepen. Major new features have shrunk from system-wide overhauls down to minor aesthetic tweaks. Engineers are spending thousands of hours polishing tiny interactive zones at the top of the display, while the core interface remains perfectly static. Software innovation has stalled because the glass slab has reached its absolute physical limit for meaningful interface design. The standard smartphone screen is no longer a blank canvas for wild new ideas. As a design problem, it has been completely solved. To understand why, we have to look back to the day the original iPhone launched. The basic language of mobile interaction, a rigid grid of uniform app icons, was set in stone 16 years ago. This diagram demonstrates the form factor bottleneck, a constraint where hardware boundaries dictate software layouts. A grid perfectly aligns with natural thumb reach mapping, making it the most efficient way to navigate a static, one-handed rectangle. Because every millimeter of that physical real estate is spoken for, developers are stuck. They can shuffle widgets around or group icons into different folders, but they are ultimately trapped within the same rigid borders. To push software forward, Apple first has to break the physical boundaries holding that software back. So what hardware solution is being built inside Cupertino to resolve this design deadlock? Apple is developing a folding iPhone to introduce a variable surface area that forces a total rewrite of its current design rules. The physical mechanic is straightforward, instantly doubling the screen's real estate in the single motion. But when that happens, the logic of mobile interface design from the last decade becomes obsolete. When the hardware bends, the grid is discarded, forcing Apple engineers to rethink mobile computing from the ground up. The first major hurdle is continuity. The software has to seamlessly morph an application from a narrow exterior screen into a sprawling interior view without losing a single line of text or visual context. Then comes multitasking. Swiping between single full-screen apps is inefficient on a tablet-sized display. The system must support desktop-class split-screen workflows, allowing users to drag and drop data between applications side by side. Finally, ergonomics. A wider device requires a two-handed grip. Critical buttons must dynamically migrate to meet the user's resting thumbs. Designing for the Fold requires Apple to construct its first entirely original mobile interface architecture in a decade. These specialized UI requirements create a deep rift in how Apple must approach its future operating systems. Because a folding screen requires its own unique interaction logic, Apple is forced into a dual-track ecosystem. Standard iPhones will move to a legacy track, receiving the polished, predictable updates seen in iOS 27. The experimental features that require a flexible canvas will reside on a separate bleeding edge track, reserved exclusively for folding hardware. Apple is effectively splitting its user base. One path prioritizes refinement of the current slab, while the other pursues radical change through the fold. Software can only grow as large as its container allows, and the modern smartphone container is finally full. Digital design has hit the physical ceiling of the traditional glass rectangle. The next era of how we navigate the digital world will be dictated entirely by the physical shape of the hardware we hold in our hands.